Washington tries to stay undefeated and continue the playoff push against a scrappy Utah team. Steve Bartle and Chris Fetters are here to break down this top 20 matchup in the Pac-12. The Huskies have won 4 straight against teams in the top 25 playoff rankings, including USC last week. The Utes, meanwhile, coming off a 55-3 blowout win against Arizona State. Michael Penix Jr. continuing his Heisman campaign. He leads the nation with 355 pass yards a game, winning his last 15 starts. Now he faces a Utah defense that ranks best in the Pac-12 in pass defense. So, Chris, how does Penix continue his dominance?
Yeah, Grace, it's just another best-on-best matchup, and as you would expect in November, because these are the games that to remember. That's what they all tell us, right? So, the nice thing is that Penix did have a nice bounce-back game. The last couple games, actually, at Stanford and at USC. So he's gotten some confidence back, and more importantly, he's gotten healthy. The little flu, cold bug, whatever he was working with, that's gone now. Talking to him last week, he was a little feistier than normal, which meant he was kind of back to his old self, back to, getting into that competitive mindset, that 1-0 mindset that they talk about, us versus us, and all the things that they mention as they get into game week preparation. So, but there's no question going up against this Utah defense, starting with that front and Jonah Ellis and all the things he's been able to do for the Utes this season, that's going to be the biggest thing. This Washington offensive line that's been so good protecting Penix and giving him time to throw to his guys like Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, the tight ends, all of those guys. They need to keep protecting Penix and keep him, his jersey clean. Because if they can keep his jersey clean and his mind sane, then he's got an opportunity to do some big things against Utah. But Jonah Ellis in that front, they don't call it Sack Lake City for nothing, guys. They're really good in that front, and they're going to get after Washington.
Yeah, and when it comes to players of this talent level with Michael Penix Jr., it's more about how much can you limit their success. Penix and the Washington offense, they're firing on all cylinders, and they have the talent to essentially beat you at times, even when you're defending them well. And so that's going to be the big question for me, is whether Utah can limit the number of explosives to take away some of those momentum-generating plays, but then also getting pressure on Penix with Jonah Ellis and that defensive front four. This is going to be a very tough test, perhaps the toughest test of the season when talking about defending the pass itself. This Washington offense is super explosive, but this Utah defense has shown the ability to limit opposing passing attacks pretty effectively this year.
All right, no Heisman talk on the other side. Utah's quarterback is just a mere pig farmer, but Bryson Barnes has kept the Utes in the Pac-12 title race, going 5-1 as a starter with his only loss to Oregon, coming off a career-high 4-touchdown performance. Steve, what has worked so well for him this season?
Yeah, he's got his own T-shirt now, so I think that's something that's working really well. And I think, but honestly, I think the big thing for him is that him and the coaching staff have finally settled in at the position. Once it became clear that Cameron Rising wasn't going to come back, I think that provided a lot of clarity for him, but more importantly for the rest of the offense. They've been able to rally around him, and a big part of his improvement, in talking about Bryson Barnes, is the play of senior leader Devon Bailey. You talk about a guy that he was 7th in the Pac-12 in targets among all Pac-12 pass catchers last year, and he's finally been able to break out and put some numbers on the board over the last month. I think he has something about 14 catches and 2 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. So he's been able to produce, and Kyle Whittingham said that was super satisfying to see him finally get some production over the last couple weeks, and he'll be super important for Barnes on Saturday, this offense, and Utah's chances at a win in Seattle.
Yeah, and when it comes to Barnes, Washington just got done dealing with a guy in Caleb Williams who can do it all with his arms and his legs. And I think Bryson Barnes can do a lot of the same types of things. It's just that Caleb Williams gets the accolades because he's the Heisman Trophy guy, and he just kind of has shown that flair that's become his trademark. But don't sleep on Bryson Barnes. He can get it done as well, and he's a very athletic quarterback, and he's got a good supporting cast around him. Steve mentioned Vele, but Sione Vaki is a guy that's now really come onto the scene that they have to really worry about as far as Washington kind of scheming against those guys. Jaquindon Jackson, don't know how well he's going to go on Saturday, but he's going to give it 100%. And then you've got some of these other guys in terms of their receivers, tight ends. I know it's been a struggle with Utah in terms of their injuries and whatnot, but they've always found a way to get things done under Kyle Whittingham. You even look at like a guy like Nate Johnson, for instance. He may be the backup quarterback, but we've seen this year that he can really do some things running the ball. And if they need another running back, it wouldn't be surprising at all if Nate Johnson came in and tried to run the ball a little bit for the Utes. So Washington's going to have their hands full. They really need to do a great job identifying the personnel that's in the game and then treat it appropriately, because they're going to have their hands full. I mean, again, Kyle Whittingham is as good as it comes when it comes to game preparation and getting his guys ready for a full 60-minute scrap. And that's exactly what Washington should expect this Saturday.
All right, Chris, last week when you were previewing Washington's game, you nailed the key to the game, saying Dillon Johnson would need to step up. He did exactly that. 256 rush yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. Both were career highs for them. So how does he continue the success with the ground game?
Well, I subscribe to the broken clock theory, Grace. I may be right every once in a while. Thankfully, I was right on this particular one with Dillon Johnson. And even talking this week to him, he was shocked. He even used the word shocking. His performance was shocking. And I think it wasn't necessarily a shock to him that he did it. I think it was more a shock to him in terms of just the situation, playing in the Coliseum. He mentioned Reggie Bush, for instance. These are guys that he's idolized, that had played in the Coliseum, and now all of a sudden he was kind of doing some of the same things. So it's just such a crazy kind of turn of events for the Mississippi State transfer to be able to do the things that he did against USC. And I know he's going to bring a ton of confidence and a ton of just all the things that you need to be able to replicate that type of performance the following week. And he's going to be going up against a much, much better defense in Utah. Washington understands that. They're going to have to scheme accordingly. But I think when you talk to Kalen DeBoer, and he really challenged him and Lee Marks, the Washington running backs coach, they really challenged that run game to really kind of do the one cut, get upfield, no messing around. Just get up and really explode through the hole when you're running the ball, run downhill, use your, play behind your pads, because Dillon Johnson's still 220 pounds. He can get the job done going downhill. And so I think, Utah is obviously going to expect a physical game. There's no doubt Washington expects a really physical game from that Utah defensive front. And so we'll see what happens on Saturday. I think it's going to be an incredible matchup.
Yeah, for me, this is actually the biggest key of the game for Utah on the defense side of the ball, because, Washington, Michael Penix, and that tremendous receiving course, they get the headlines, and for good reason. They make their money by throwing the ball around. But Washington showed last week that they're just as dynamic on the ground, with Dillon Johnson going for 256 and 4 touchdowns. And so Utah has always been about making teams one-dimensional, and so you can't allow Dillon Johnson to get going in this game when you have to give so much attention to Penix and this passing attack. So for me, this is going to be a big test for the Utah defensive front. Can they limit the run game with minimal numbers up front? It's going to be a tough test because this Washington offensive line is big and they are really good at what they do, and that can be tough. So for me, this is a big key to the game, and you have to take away or at least limit Dillon Johnson in that run game for the Washington Huskies.
All right, Steve, you kind of got us started here with keys to the game. So, Chris, we're going to shelf your broken clock theory for this week again. Let's see if you can go back-to-back. What's your key to a Huskies win this week?
Well, I think it's interesting because it's not necessarily a player or a coach or anything like that. I think the key to the game is going to be Husky Stadium. We saw with the Oregon game, with the 12:30 kick, the national spotlight on Washington, that they can come through in the clutch, because everyone's talked nationally now that if Washington and Oregon match up like in the Pac-12 title game, for instance, Oregon would be favored. Everyone thinks that Oregon is the better team right now in the Pac-12. They may absolutely be right about that, but I think we found out that day that Husky Stadium was the difference in that game. And I don't know, Steve would tell better, in terms of the atmospheres that Utah has been in this year, but Washington needs to make it the toughest atmosphere that Utah has faced this season. Because as you saw in the initial graphic on this, guys, Washington's 13-2 all time against Utah. But guess what? Those 2 losses that Washington had, they were both in Husky Stadium. Utah has beaten Washington Husky Stadium in 2015 and in 2019. So Kyle Whittingham knows how to get this thing done in Husky Stadium. It's not foreign to him, but at the same time, when you have a guy like Bryson Barnes, a guy that maybe hasn't been in a situation like this, you got to make him as uncomfortable as possible. The other thing, guys, they need to get turnovers because Washington got their first forced fumble of the entire season against USC, their first of the entire season. They have to improve that. And if the Husky Stadium crowd can make a difference in terms of getting Bryson Barnes uncomfortable, getting Utah uncomfortable, maybe forcing some miscues, that can loom large in a game where 2 teams are just going to be duking it out and throwing haymakers all game.
Yeah, a big key to this game, perhaps the biggest key in this game, is handling that Husky Stadium atmosphere. And Utah over the last couple of years have played in a lot of big games and a lot of big environments, a lot of hostile environments. Even this season with that Utah-Florida game, USC, on the road at the Coliseum. So this team has been through, tough environments, but this is no doubt going to be one of, if not the toughest environment for this team. And a big key to this game is going to be the youth on this squad and their ability to handle that sort of environment. Spencer Fano and Mikey Matthews have been the true freshman headliners of this group this season. Spencer Fano was a midseason freshman All-American selection by Chris Hummer in 24/7 Sports. But it's going to be important for others, for other youth, young guys to step up. A guy like nickel corner Smith Snowden, who got his first action on the defensive side of the ball last week against Arizona State. He played really, really well. And, Kyle Whittingham praised him for how well he played at that nickel spot. So that's going to be a position that could potentially be, a swing position for Utah. Can they get Smith Snowden on the field? Can other guys, other freshmen and other young guys step up and handle this environment at Husky Stadium? That's going to be a big key for Utah in this one as well.
All right, great stuff as always, guys. Steve and Chris, thank you. And for more on the game, be sure to check out DawgMan.com and UteZone.com for all your Washington and Utah football and recruiting news all year long.